Hey guys, this is a recording for apex.world. Today I'm with Jason Aughenbaugh from Richmond, Virginia, and I saw a video from him called Relay, and he's showing up some workflow stuff done in Apex. Probably if you're gonna follow the news, you also have seen that Doc Gold has published a couple of blogs about this topic, and recently he published a blog for us to vote which direction he should go, which I didn't really understand completely, but I voted just out of my guts. I thought this is something he probably can achieve. But actually, I have no idea about the whole subject, workflow stuff. I just know, okay, Doug is working on something. When it comes to workflow with Apex, I'd rather ask him first what to do. And now suddenly Jason came around the corner and showed something like a ready product for workflow. And I want to clarify for the community what's going on. What is workflow in general? What options do we have? What are you guys doing? What can we expect? And what should we do? Thanks, Jason, for being on.
Thanks for having me.
So that's my very first question. Now I have this workflow understanding that you say, okay, guys, we all are in the situation that we had to code some if then else. If this process is going in this direction, then do this. If the decision is in this direction, do this. So I coded a complete workflow in SQL, hard coded, and it's working fine. It takes a long time, of course, very hard to test. But the problem is, now after maybe 8 years, nobody really knows anymore what's going on in SQL and how to change the workflow and what is happening if I change the source code. So I guess the meaning of the workflow approach itself is get out the complexity of the source code and put in a different tool first to visualize it, that you really see visually what the workflow really is, and not reading tons of source code and imagine what it could be. And then it's easier to maybe to change it and to enhance it and let the work do some kind of engine instead of I don't know, the PL/SQL source code. Always speaking from the point of view of Apex PL/SQL developers. So is this a right understanding of workflow in general, or would you say, oh no, don't let me start?
Well, okay, so pretty much every Application Express developer, and you'll hear me call it Apex, and I'm sorry, that's just something that happens with me. The fundamentals of workflow go further than PL/SQL. PL/SQL is a procedural language. And so therefore, it itself is a workflow, because you're declaring your variables, you're telling it to do certain things, you're saying, if this happens, then do this, if that happens, then do that, or switch over to another program altogether. And in the sense of thinking of a process that you're going through, PL/SQL is probably the best, I don't know, visualization for most programmers of how a process gets implemented. Now take it to the next level, and you basically want to say, I have this business process, and we map them out. And I made the example in my last video of these stencils that we all tend to have. I mean, I bet you probably have one. They're the little IBM stencils where you have the triangles, the diamonds, the different squares that mean all different things about how a program is supposed to work. The inputs, the outputs, the tasks, the conditions, what have you. So when you think about that, and I think about how Application Express is, over the years, and I've been working with Application Express since version 1.6. And I really got into it after version 2 when they actually changed it to Application Express. And I noticed that programmers who were building applications were implementing these business processes through things like page transitions and hard-coded PL SQL and a lot of those things. And your example is pretty apt, where you write a complex set of code and then you have to come back and change it. Unfortunately, the reality with most business processes is that people will change those business processes overnight. So one of my realities with working with another workflow component on an enterprise system was that we built this really complex workflow and got it all implemented, and then the business decided that it was too cumbersome for them, so they wanted to chop certain things out and put new things in, reconnect everything. And that literally happened a week after we implemented it. So all that work that we did, we had to go back and chop it. And I can show you, I have actually a couple of PDFs up on my computer right now, and I can show you what that final process looked like. But the business process that they gave me initially was this one page. It could fit on an 8x10, or I guess for you, you're in Europe, so it would be an A4?
A4, yeah.
So an A4 sheet, and they handed that to me, said, this is our business process, and we want to see it there. And I was like, okay, we need to talk, because they're talking about how this person does this and this person does that. Well, that's great when you're talking about an overview process, but when you talk about workflow, you have to get into the weeds of the specific changes and all these different things that happen in the system underneath that. And so after about a week and a half, 2 weeks of interviewing people that are involved in the process, I had this really large chart. And let me see if I can show it to you real quick, because this is kind of an example of just how detailed it can get. So,
I saw, oh yeah, I see your screen.
Yeah, welcome to my nightmare. This was a couple of years ago, and you'll notice I have two tabs open here. So this is a service request process for a maintenance system, and it's accompanying work order process. So in this, everything starts off with a service request, goes through this really complex set of rules and tasks, and people doing this, people doing that, to then the service request gets converted to a work order, and then it starts this mess. And that's just the first pages of it. You know, I can scroll down through this stuff and you'll see, all sorts of fun things that are just an absolute nightmare when it comes to making them happen in a system. So this isn't intellectual property, but it demonstrates the point. And
you actually coded that in PL SQL?
No, this was actually built in another workflow system that application already had. But there was this piece right here, and let me see if I can scroll into it. So there is a piece in here. I forgot where I put it.
It's not that important.
That one condition node right there. So conditions in workflow are a yes/no thing.
Yes.
Right. That particular one could not be implemented in the workflow engine that they had, so I had to implement it in PL SQL. And about 500 lines of code later, it produced a very simple 1 or 0. Actually, this one produced a 1, 2, or 3, and it told this thing which way to go. And that was great. I mean, I was already very, very comfortable with PL SQL, but this is still something where, that one component I had to do in PL SQL. But that entire chart I'd have to do in PL SQL right now in order to make it work in Application Express. Or I would have to build an engine that was capable of making it, sort of consolidating the magic of PL SQL underneath and designing it the way that I did in this other system.
You lost me.
Okay.
You lost me.
Tell me where I can bring you back.
Now you're talking about engine. So the next thing, and this is the last thing I know about workflow, is there are actually two components. There's always this business process modeling thing where you create charts like that. And then you export this and import it into a workflow server, which is running this instance and is calling different systems to answer the yes, no, or user inputs or stuff like that. So So in general, so is this true? We have something like a program where you simply visualize and design this workflow first, right? What you
Yes.
get out here.
Yes.
So,
So if you were in Chicago with us for the Kscope conference,
yeah, I was.
did you sit in on a presentation from, and I'm going to butcher his name, I think it's Niels de Bruin? Or Niels de Bruin?
Yeah.
I don't know. I
Niels
always
is
have a hard time.
fine. Niels is fine.
Well, his presentation was, he was talking about workflow options. And at the time, no one really knew that I was already working on workflow. So he actually showed, PL flow. He showed the other options that are there. But what he showed and what he was focusing on was Camunda, where you build this process in a website called BPMN.io, and then you have to import it into an engine that then takes care of it.
Yes.
And I've never liked that. I never did, because there's still programming that you have to do.
But let's start there, because Camunda is the thing. I saw Neil's presentation someday somewhere. I don't know. I remember where it was, but it was on some conference. And this is what I took with out of the conference was, okay, you have this workflow engine. Camunda is the name which I remembered, and there are two different workflow providers in the world, and Camunda is a good one, and you pay for that. There's another one you don't pay, but you better pay for that because you have great support from the people, which I love. So this is what I got out of the thing. Camunda is this, I don't know, let's call Photoshop of workflow. So,
well, the thing that turned me off about Camunda is that it requires you to have a Java server as well.
And just without going into details, so this is what I took out. So there is something already out in the world, a product, let's call it Camunda, and there is this designer that gives you the ability to make this business process models, what we see right now. And then there's also a server. I call it a server, where you put this workflow design and let it run, and then I can't remember there is a REST interface, so
it passes data back to that server.
Data back and forth. So this is this is the understanding I still have of workflow. So there is something out there, right? Let's say a professional product you can use and you can license, and I also know that another guy showed an alternative, a different product which was for free, I guess. But at the end, they agreed that Camunda would be the better approach. And then the last thing I remember was you have two options. You can just have Apex be the part that provides the workflow engine with data and receives data. So the workflow is running in the workflow engine in Camunda, for example, and Apex is just giving the data to the workflow engine and receives the data back. Or the other way around, that you say, okay, I already have the workflow in PL SQL, or it's a very small thing. I just would like to visualize it and call this workflow engine and say, hey guy, I'm now in the process on step 3. Show it to my customer that they understand what possibility they have to do next. So this is what I got out. So there is something, a product, Camunda, and this is what you probably should use. Stop. Then I come up with something what I also read in Doug's blog, PL Flow, and I have no idea what this is.
PL Flow is an open source project that was put out a few years ago. It's been a few years since it's even been updated, so it's no longer being really used. There's another one as well out there, Flow Control, which actually tries to implement workflow using what's called a state machine or finite state machine. And you know, they both have their ins and outs. Some of the, not a whole lot of good documentation. Actually, pretty hard to make either one of them work. I did a lot of looking at those originally.
Hold on, Jason. When we talk about, what are we talking now about? The workflow server? Is PLflow a workflow server built in PL/SQL, or do I?
It's PLflow is a workflow engine that's built in PL/SQL.
A workflow engine. Okay.
And
so
requires more work to actually make it work. So it collects the data for the workflow, and then you have to define the processing and everything else to go with it. So it's pretty involved when you actually get to work with it.
Okay, this is now what I understand afterwards. I have voted for it. Sorry, Doug.
Well, no, I mean, I will never, ever, ever tell Doug that I would never want to discourage him from an ambitious project, because I've been doing the ambitious project for a while, and there are times where you really will get overwhelmed with what you see and how you try to solve problems. So, you know, for the last 2 years, it's been any little scrap of time that I have that I'm not spending with my family or working, that I've been, you know, solving some of these more complex problems. And it's a pretty daunting task when you really look at the idea of taking something that is essentially so complex and turning it into something that should, to the end user and the designer, look incredibly simple. So and you might not have seen the quotes in the video that I did, but there's 2 quotes from 2 authors. Arthur C. Clarke once said that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And the corollary came from Larry Niven, who said any sufficiently advanced magic is indistinguishable from technology. So in this particular case, I wanted Relay to be a workflow engine that was highly complicated, could satisfy a lot of different ins and outs that people could employ in a workflow and business process.
Perfect. Now we have.
But I wanted it to look like magic.
Okay, so we have. Okay, we rewind back. So there is this thing called Camunda, which is a workflow process builder where you can create pictures like that. There's a workflow engine. So, okay, this is a product.
Yes.
Then we have the PLflow, which is a PL/SQL package, API, something, which also wants to be or should be workflow engine, workflow server, right? But there is no, is there a visual component where, how do I make my models?
It looked like at the time that that the developer stopped working on it, he was considering a visual engine or a visual front end.
It lacks a visual front end, but you would get something like a workflow engine, but you need to draw it yourself in Visio or somehow, and right? But
you would have to map out your process, and then you would have to distill it into records that you would then load into the Oracle table. And then my understanding of it is you'd still have to write a decent amount of PL/SQL to actually engage that engine.
Okay, so the benefit that you probably think is, on the one hand, I have an external product, an external server, and the other thing is, okay, we are already in Oracle and we all love the database. Why don't we let the database do all the work, and instead of sending data back and forth over interfaces and APIs, why don't we let the database do all the work and never leave the database, because we have a good experience with Apex to keep everything in the database. This is the PLflow.
You are preaching to the converted. I believe that the database is the fastest processing component of any Application Express application, or even other applications that use Oracle. It's just incredible.
Yeah, and then, so now we have PLflow, and now you come up with something called Relay.
Yes.
Right, which you showed in your video, which was pretty impressive. When I saw the interface, that, oh my God, all I understood is you put a lot of work into this so far.
Looking at the timelines, I've been working on Relay longer than even PL Flow and Flow Control have been around.
Okay, this is how it looks. This is what I can see right away. And this is also a workflow engine running in PL SQL. Is this true?
Yes. The heart of Relay is a PL SQL 100% PL SQL workflow engine.
Okay.
So
and you also, what I also saw, and what was pretty impressive, is that you also have a visual component in it, right?
Yes, I do. So bring that up right now, and I'll just take you into the process that I built when I was doing the video. Pardon the mess, I've been testing. So this is that visual component. And I found that this is actually the result of an integration with a third-party JavaScript library and some creative coding on my part and on the part of Adrian Ping and Mani Lachele. We did a little project during the first InSum hackathon where we created the Map It program, and that really was just the skin of what you see here. So underneath this is really just the, okay, so jump into here. And this stuff I did show in the video, but you're configuring the nodes once you've put them on the chart. So putting them on the chart is the first step. You're basically laying everything out, but then you still have to go in and you still have to sort of tell it what it is.
Don't let us go into details now.
No, I understand.
Let me first do the overview. Is okay. We have an external product. We have PL Flow, which is just an engine, no visualization component. Now we have Relay, which is an engine, a PL SQL workflow engine, and you also have a visual component designer in Apex.
Yes, right? And one other piece to that is there is a separate application called the Relay interface that is basically purpose-built to be loaded into a user's workspace and allow them to integrate to Relay with a few steps to pass the right data to the interface and activate workflow and have low impact on the application that's actually using it.
Okay, let me stop there. So what are we seeing right now?
Right now, you're seeing the Relay designer.
Ah, the Relay designer. Okay.
So this is where a workflow designer would come in and chart out that business process, put all the configurations in place, configure everything, put it all together. It's also where they would come to do some minor administration of instances, which is the execution of the workflow in progress. So from here. And I'll show you this real quick.
Hold on, no, don't show anything. I need to not lose you again. So,
right
but now we have a designer, a visual
design and administration of workflows in progress.
And you say, okay, I can design something in here. And what is the output?
The output is a set of metadata that gets stored into Oracle tables. And then when the integrated application executes workflow, it basically starts off and says, okay, for the record that it's executing it against. So let's take the example of that chart that I was showing you before. A work order is a record. It has a unique identifier.
Too much detail.
Okay.
So I have the designer. You store this in metadata, just like we have the Apex repository, right?
Yes.
Okay. Then you mentioned there's another component called interface.
Yes.
So you install this basically on your workspace as an Apex application, and you can design your workflow.
Relay is installed the same way that Application Express is. It installs into its own schema.
Okay, it's installed in your own schema.
And it is shared throughout the entire database. So Relay is like Application Express in that it gets installed into its own schema. The designer lives inside the workspace for that schema. And people would log in and do their designing in a central place. But in their workspace for their application, they can tap into Relay by integrating it with their applications.
So, okay, now we understand that, okay, we have an own schema, we have a separate workspace where just the page designer, the relay designer lives, right?
Yes.
And we can build processes and workflows there. So
Yes.
now I have my own workspace where we all live every day with 20 applications. And how do I leverage my designed workflow from my personal application in my own workspace? How do I do that? And you mentioned another component. It calls something interface something.
Yes. So this is my testing application. It is uglier than sin, but it
testing
works.
Application means you are now in a personal Apex application.
Yes. So yes. So give you that perspective. On my Firefox browser here, this is living in its own. This is in a workspace that I've just tentatively called AWF, Application Express Workflow. And then over in my Chrome browser, this is living in AWF Test, its own schema and its own workspace. So they are segregated. There is nothing that you can see from this schema except for the components that I've granted to that schema to be able to use workflow. And it's a short list of about 3 synonyms that get installed and 1 package. So this is my test. This is my test application. It was purpose built to test all of the different scenarios in workflow. So in here, I'm in a record, and this one is actually set up to use the integration, the interface application. So I put this button here. I'm gonna press it. Oh shoot, I messed up. I did something stupid last night. I can actually show you this. This is fine. I just I made some changes, and
we all know that so well.
You know you're not supposed to change anything before you show.
We know this very well.
All right, so I'm just gonna go here and just change this speedy quick. So, all right, so real quick, since I'm already here, these are the components that need to be there for Relay to work. So a couple of page 0 items, a page 0 button, and there's a couple of other page 0 items too if you wanted to actually, if you wanted to build the components of the interface directly into your application, you could.
Oh, don't stop. I didn't get that.
I've built the interface so you didn't have to do that.
Hold on. Now we are in your own application. And we have this workflow, this relay designer in a different workspace. And the first thing I have to do is install a package, get some synonyms working. No. All you have to do is execute one program, and the relay system installs the synonyms and the package for you. In my own parsing schema.
Yes.
Okay, and then in my Apex application, I have to do what to leverage the...
Okay, so back here in the designer, the 4 required components are these 3 page 0 items, which if you look at the source, they use that synonym and a specific call to a function to get what they need.
Okay.
So each one of those is required, and then you need a button that basically points directly to the interface application and passes those values to it.
Okay, stop. Interface application.
Yes.
Where is the interface application?
The interface application is one that gets installed directly into the schema or into the workspace that you're operating in. So that is the relay workflow. That's my test app. And the other one is the actual interface app.
Okay, you install another application in your workspace once or for...
Just once per workspace.
Okay, good. I have to set up a couple of items and a button in P0. I have to install the interface application, and the interface application probably does the communication to the engine.
Yes. And there are other than the synonyms and the package that get installed, there's nothing else that gets installed to make it work, to make the interface application work. So it's light I wanted it to be as lightweight as possible so that if someone decided they didn't want to use workflow anymore, they could remove it easy.
Okay,
You know?
now we can now we can see an example.
Okay, so back here again, I'm just going to reload this page. I'm going to go into my friendly neighborhood record here. I'm going to press workflow. Come on. Oh, I didn't save the page, did I? You're going to find that I'm an idiot. Sorry. 1061, say okay, and I'll save it. Now, I was doing another test and there's a duplicate of the that alias. All right, so back in here we are, run it. All right, so here we are. It just comes in as a pop-up. So as a modal dialog, it brings you in, and whatever page you decide to send it to, you could send it directly to the inbox, you could send it directly to the processes, you could send it.
I don't get it. I don't get it.
Yeah.
So we clicked on a button. Then
we clicked on a button.
We saw a
it's magic.
I see that. And where is the content coming from, this modal dialog?
In this modal dialog, it is basically accessing those synonyms, and the information is getting loaded into a series of collections inside of Application Express.
We are still in our workflow, in our workspace.
We're still in our workspace.
Okay.
All the data that the interface application needs gets loaded into collections inside of the session state at the time that you use it.
So basically the content from this modal dialog is coming from the interface application?
Yes. This is actually page 2 in the interface application.
Okay.
So since it's in the workspace and everything's been set up right, and I'm working on putting all the instructions together to make this work, but it's a short list of maybe 10. Once you have it all set up, it basically, once you hit that workflow button, you are now, the pop-up that happens is part of the interface application, but it looks like it's part of yours.
Yes. And what does it show me? What do I see here?
Well, right now, what you see is a list of processes that are affiliated with this application and with the application and page that you just came from.
Okay, so basically the interface application is communicating to the workflow engine, and it says, hey, you are on page 2 of your application. You call the interface application. Let me look up what you have designed in your workflow engine, what possibilities you have for page 2, and I show you now all the options you have for page 2, right?
So this is every process that has been affiliated with page 2 of this test application.
Okay.
And so in this, you can see a number of different things. So these different symbols, these are indicators that the workflow is in progress. This one is an indicator, the cog is an indicator that the workflow is not in progress but can be executed. And then there's another symbol for a ban, like the typical ban symbol, the circle with a line through it, says that you can't execute that process.
So are you seeing now one workflow and you see where the workflow is, or are you seeing different options, or what?
Right now I'm seeing 5 different workflows.
Different
that
workflows
can be executed.
Okay, now.
And actually, if you scroll through it, there's 31 different workflows that you could execute against this same record right now.
Okay. Understand that.
So the other pages here, so in some cases, workflow has to stop, and it requires human interaction to make it work. So when a human decision needs to be made or a human task has to be completed, it has to stop the workflow so that they can do what needs to be done. And that's where the inbox comes in. And there isn't anything in the inbox right now. There should be something in the inbox. I might have broken something last night. There's supposed to be a couple of things in the inbox here, and those are basically tasks that the user is required to do. And that's very specific because the username is also passed to the interface. And if that username has a task associated with them, it brings up a list of tasks that they're required to do.
Okay, there's an inbox. I totally get that for user interactions. to decide what to do, right?
Yes. So the other piece here, let me just find a decision node real quick. Okay, so the decisions here, a decision is one that gets executed, and then when it requires it, brings the user directly to that decision to be able to make their choice and send it on its merry way. And I broke that too, apparently. The curse of the live demo. Okay, so in that, this is where all that interaction happens. So if you encounter a decision where they have to make a choice between, you know, 1 or 5 different possible paths, it'll take you directly to that choice. If you cancel out of it, it'll show up in your inbox as a required thing to do, and it'll take you back to those choices. If not, it just runs, and then when it completes, it closes the window out and takes you back to your application. But a lot of people would say, okay, this thing supposedly ran. Why didn't I see anything happen? Or it's just too quick to make something happen. It literally is very quick. So I left a breadcrumb trail, and what it does is it tells you, hey, the workflow run was started here, created this instance. In this particular case, I did put a licensing component in to where it has to be registered to operate properly.
Now you're showing what already happened in your workflow.
This is the history of what has currently happened in this workflow.
Okay, I get this.
And it's basically running through. It's like a minor debug kind of deal.
And at some time this thing is finished. Right?
Yes. Yes.
And
right there.
You start with your own application. You have some page, and on the page you need a workflow to go on in your process. Then you design the workflow in your Relay Designer, you put it onto the server, you have installed the interface application, and now you have the possibility to start the workflow right from Apex, inside Apex. Let the user decide some stuff, working on inbox, see what's happened before, and it finished somehow, and then the user can go on and say, okay, now everything is fine, my holiday has been approved.
Pretty much, yes. So the difference between some of the workflow engines that are out there is some of them just pass the ball. It's like a pass between different people to inform them or have them do something. The kind of the boiling the ocean side of Relay is that this is capable of actually changing values inside the record and publishing them back to your schema.
Okay. You actually can write back into your parsing schema.
Yes.
And change something, and you see.
Yeah. So a good example of that is in a purchasing flow where at one of my old companies, if you had a project that was going to cost less than $50,000 in expense time or $2,000 in capital investment, it was a just do it project. So you could get a pass on it.
Yes.
If it went above that, it required a manager's approval. If it went above I think 100,000 director, or so on and so forth.
Okay.
And that's kind of the thing, is that, you know, you can get an auto approval just by setting up the right set of conditions and allowing them to evaluate.
Okay, now I got the concept of it, right?
Okay.
Now let's go back one step.
Okay.
So I voted for Doug sorry, can I revoke my vote? I have no idea what I voted for. It just sounded the least work for you.
I had a conflict of interest, so I didn't even vote.
Yeah, that's what I saw. This was your first entry, and I said, huh? What is Jason? I have no idea what he's saying.
Well, when Doug put out his original post that said he was going to work on a workflow engine that was kind of like a free to the masses kind of thing, I thought it was a very ambitious project, but I also wanted to kind of at least sit down with him and show him a little bit of what I'd done. but also to kind of give him some perspective on where some of the pitfalls might be, because I'm supportive of the project. I think, you know, the way he's looking at it, it's kind of like a Relay Light kind of deal. But in the end, I was already just about here in the development of Relay. So I didn't want to discourage him from it, but I wanted to maybe let him know that there's some helpful advice there. And he listened, and we talked for about an hour and whatnot. And I showed him a little bit of what you're seeing now. And he asked questions. I answered questions, and, you know, life went on. When I saw that he hadn't done anything for a while, I was worried that he had gotten that perspective of, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? and it turns out he published the next post and said, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? And I don't want to discourage him, because I think that ambitious projects need to be done, because you don't learn anything unless you do.
Okay.
And, you know, and I'm supportive of his efforts. I really am. Do I think that he will go as far as I've gone? No, I don't think anyone would ever actually desire to do a solo project and go this far. But, you know, that being said, I did. And, you know, it's getting to that point where I want to have some fun and I want to show it off.
Okay, you did. Great. So now the question arises for me as just a simple customer. Want to solve this workflow problem from an Apex developer point of view. So I have the option to use this external workflow engine like Camunda, and then there is your project, which is in some state. And are you planning? I mean, the benefit we probably understand. We don't need a separate server set up and have do some interface programming with the server and stuff. So the whole thing runs in the database, so it's faster, and you can write back into your parsing schema, so it's pretty much suited for Apex application or PL/SQL application, and also especially Apex application.
When I wrote the engine, when I wrote the PL/SQL side of this, I was originally thinking, you make it to where you can link in Application Express, but also Oracle Forms and Reports, and make it to where the
this was a long time ago when you say that now.
Yes, it was. And now knowing that Oracle Forms and Reports is kind of in a sunset mode, and might be a long sunset, but it's still there. And Application Express is really rising to its place in business application development. I decided to really start gearing it towards Application Express and make it to where all the little bits and pieces that make it easier for Application Express are in there. Okay. And so that's really where it came from and where it's going.
Okay. So the most important question for me is, when can I use it? When is there? Do you plan to use? Is there a version 1.0? Are you making a product out of it?
Let's call this
into that.
Let's call this version 0.8. I'm in the throes of testing. Obviously, I've gotten a lot of the graphical work done, and obviously, I've broken a few things even in the last day that I need to fix. My current semi-tentative final plan is to load a copy of Relay to apex.oracle.com and publish the notes on how people can use it in that environment. So if you have a workspace in apex.oracle.com and you want to test out Relay and play with it and see what it's all about, I figured Oracle's already given us that environment to work with Application Express. It's not that far of a departure to actually put something like this there and allow it to work in an environment that's designed to try and break it. So
okay.
So that is the next step. That will be version 0.9. Now version 1, I guess it's been a while since I actually conceived that I could get to this point Because I did say a lot of times, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? But now it's kind of like I'm at that point where I'm on the verge of really trying to figure out what I want to do with it. I mean, I could make it into a product. God knows I've had a lot of people that say, well, why don't you make it open source? And then I think about the
No.
I think about
Sorry, Martin.
the nearly 3,000 hours that I've put into this.
Yes.
I was looking at your site the other day, and you were quantifying each line of code that's written in PL SQL.
Yes.
The statistics that I'll tell you right now is that Relay, the engine itself, including, let's say, all the tables, views, packages, all the database components, equals out to roughly 20,000 lines of code.
Okay.
Now, admittedly, 8,000 of that is a table API that I generated. So I can't take full credit for that, but I did write the generator.
Of course you did.
So that's really what it is, and it's a magnitude greater than what I thought it would be. So here's where I'm at, and I'll be very honest with you. I believe that it would make a very great product. Do I want to charge as much as what Camunda would charge you to take on one of their products paid for? Oh no, because Application Express gave me a way to really create a number of different applications, including Relay, without anything more charged to me than the cost of the database. And even then, right now, you're looking at Relay was developed on Oracle XE.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's suitable for 9i. It's suitable for 9i. It's suitable for.
Don't say 9i.
No, I'm sorry, not 9i. Not 9i. Okay, I'm sorry.
Gerald is hearing this.
It is built currently in 11.
It's also working for 11.
Yeah, it's currently built for 11G. I don't know why I said 9i. Currently working for 11G. I know it will work in 12C and 18C. So it is forward compatible to everything that's going on right now. I think it works in 10G because that's where I started it at, really. And not much has really changed in the code since then.
It's gonna work. So
it'll work.
The questions still arise. So I always say, it's also true for plugins, right? People say, yeah, there are 150 plugins. Yeah, literally 150 plugins on apex.world. Just find a plugin and you solve the problem. Is that well? Yeah. Take it one step back. If you have a project, right, which goes, it's easy to calculate the project in total cost of ownership. You're probably gonna go for very fast to €1 million or dollars over the total cost of ownership, developing, maintaining it, blah blah blah. So we have $1 million project, and are you sure that you want to depend yourself on one guy having done a nice Apex plugin, which is breaking on the next Apex version, and suddenly you have to dig into and make it work because the customer got used to it, or you have to replace it. So be very careful to make yourself dependent on one developer we probably don't even know.
Exactly.
Right? So and on the good part, I have to bring in AOP in there. So I did this. I did a fixed price project for a very large customer, and in the contract were, okay guys, if you don't make it by the time, we subtract you money every month. So if you delay 3 months, you just earn half of it. And if you delay 6 months, you get out without, you have to go out with anything, right?
Yes.
So I decided, I talked to Dimitri before, I said, I have to trust you that you are in the project with me and fix all the problems, because I suggested let's go with AOP, and it worked out great, but only because Dimitri was really sitting literally next to me and solving all the AOP problems, right? And the same thing concerns I have with something like that. So this set means Open source, no way I would ever use this. No way. So if this would be a product, I would say, okay, I don't care about the money. People don't care about the money because we're working for companies, for big companies, and they spend a lot of money for developing and maintaining projects. On the contrary, I want to be 100% sure that I'm working with a company who is still there in 5 years from now, and is developing the product in 5 years from now, and has a great support. I can call them and they say, okay, I'm going to make a bug fix for you, just for you. You can install it next week before your deadline is to go to production. So if you ask me, make a product, make it worth for you, and have a couple of people to maintain this. Otherwise, I wouldn't use it.
Yes. So, and that's true. I mean, right now I am literally an army of one, and my current employer is not even in the Application Express world.
So, did you hear, community? Did you hear that? So there is.
So
guy to hire.
I am going to tell you. I'm gonna lay down what I think my options are right now as far as what to do with Relay. So the first option is, yeah, I could open source it, but like you've noticed, there's many hours and a whole lot of code involved.
No, it's not even that. Even open sourcing it means it's dead, because no serious company would use something like this, which is this is the heart of an application. The workflow is the heart of an application.
Well, I basically what I wanted to do with this was tear that heart out and separate application flow from workflow. And because when you have workflow at the heart of an application inside that code,
yes,
every time you change the business process,
yes, sure, that's the whole point. That's the whole point of the workflow, right?
Exactly.
But once you have implemented this, we're not talking about a small plugin where you have a nice user interface gimmick and say, okay, we don't have this anymore because in 18.1 it's breaking and the developer is not caring anymore, and instead of going on to the hassle and make it work again, we replace it with something else. Okay, that's bad, but it's doable.
Yes.
You can't go back once I decided for a workflow engine and having built the workflow for a huge project, you can't go back, right?
Exactly.
You have to do it from scratch. So this set means I need a very reliable company on the other side where I really trust that you're around for the next 5 to 10 years, that you earn enough money to have a couple of guys maintaining this, developing this, bug fixing, stuff like that. So the real deal. And for me, it's looked really promising what I see right now.
Yes. So the options that I was thinking of along those lines, I don't want to open source it. I like it. I like what I did with it, but I think that in order for companies to respect it, it should come at a price. And that stems from someone else telling me one time that they were suggesting to Oracle that they needed to have 2 versions of Application Express, one that costs $50,000 so that companies respect it, and the other one that's for free for the people who are actually smart enough to realize how powerful and great it really is. And, that's great. So where I'm at right now and my options on the table are that I could sell it to one of the larger organizations that are already in Application Express that would be willing to develop it, support it, care and feed it along the way, and then, oh, by the way, sell it at a reasonable price to the community, because I don't want a $200,000 machine like Camunda is if you have to pay for it. But I think that you're right. If people pay for it, they tend to respect the fact that it's there for a long time. And so I could sell it to one of those larger companies, no matter if it's like Mythics or Insum or whoever wants to actually go that route. Or I could set up my own shop and do it that way, hire a couple people, like you said.
No matter what, you need to be involved in any. So once you out of the project is dead.
Well,
That's
I
you.
hope, I would certainly hope not.
You put 20,000 lines of code in this, and how many, I don't know how many years. Trust me, once you are out, this thing is dead.
Well, I certainly hope that in the end I built it in such a way that it's like you've bought a car.
No.
All you need is, what you need is a mechanic.
You put a lot of heart into it and passion into it. Nobody will ever do that. They will say, oh, I don't understand the source code. Why did it do it this way? They have no idea. So if this will become a success in any way, I agree, maybe you want to hook up with a larger company but you need to be the boss of this project. Right, you need to make the decisions and be the main coder, and you can't give this out of your hands.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that my options right now are pretty wide open. Version 0.9 will be an install onto apex.oracle.com, where I'll challenge the community to break it in as many creative ways as they can possibly come up with. Version 1 may very well be a community edition where your average developer can download it and install 1 or 2 processes and not ever be able to have more than that running it at a given time. And anything else it would require you to buy a server license.
Sure.
But the question of how much should that server license cost that unlocks the system for them, that's to be determined.
Yeah, sure.
And whether or not it's me hanging out and reestablishing tribal knowledge, which is my imprint, or me selling it to another prominent company inside the community, that's to be determined. But my options are open right now.
Okay, to all communities, when you buy this and Chase is not on board, I won't buy it. Period.
Don't say that. I could get hit by a bus. I could get hit by a bus, and the whole thing would crash. And where would my legacy be?
When you're on version 3.0, right? And you have to develop with a team version 3.0. Then you can get hit by a bus.
That's what I'm saying. And when it gets to that point, yes, I really tried to design something that could take on a life of its own beyond me. And when it has gotten to that point, then I'll be just as happy either way. I mean, right now I'm standing at the end of near the end of a development process that has been 10 years and so many different things that I could write a number of different presentations for Kscope, just in problems that I solved under the hood. And the learning experience has been fantastic. And I'm passionate about this, but I'm also passionate about metrics and other things too. So, in the end, I certainly hope I put together something that's going to be a head turner. But I also kind of hope that it takes on a life of its own.
Yeah, sure. It has to be. It has to become a product, right?
Yes.
Okay, great talk, Jason. Very interesting. Now I understand the whole scenery, I guess.
Yep.
And
so in the next coming weeks, though, I'm also going to be putting out, I have 3 different videos planned. Hopefully my voice doesn't put people to sleep, because I know when I get into demonstration mode, I try to take on this really...
So let me tell you that.
I don't want to lull you into snoring.
Let me tell you that. I got feedback on your first video and people told me, oh, that's much too detailed, and he lost me in the first 5 minutes. He should have done an overview first. And you are a passionate developer and you want to show, oh, I did this there and you can do this and you right now this is why I wanted to put this video out, to get the people even the understanding of the complete architecture. What are we talking about before you show anything, right?
Yes.
It was the same
well,
thing. I
did an overview once. I did an overview video once, and it was mainly just a demonstration.
I didn't see it. So the first video was
I'll link it to you.
A week ago, right? But now this is a good starting point, and from there people know what you're doing, and they can follow you. And when you talk about version 0.9, what time frame are we probably talking about?
I am prepping the install as we speak.
Oh, okay. So soon. So
soon, yes. When is soon?
With the safe harbor.
Yes.
So it's coming out soon.
Yeah, you know how hard it is to tell my wife that? She's like, when are you going to be done with this? Soon. And she can reach out and touch me in ways that are very painful.
And what would you think, how close are you to a 1.0?
That really depends on the breakage of 0.9. You know, you never really know how much something is going to, how different, let me rephrase that. You never know exactly how many different ways something can break until you put it into someone else's hands.
Exactly. Tell me about it.
I mean, my career has been an exercise in learning from my mistakes. And on the system that is kind of my primary skill set, I actually got my second job with that system by telling the manager that, no, I don't know everything, but I've broken it in more ways than anybody else I've ever met, and I know how to fix it. So that's really what it is that I don't know how many ways that people can break it, but I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Okay, perfect. We are all looking forward to it. Thanks for the talk, and good luck for getting this out as a product.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. I appreciate the time.